Good morning everyone and welcome to this third episode of Reefs Go Live. My name is Elsa and I will be your topside host today. We are so excited to have you joining us again live from the beautiful reefs of Little Cayman. Especially on this special day because today Sir David Attenborough is celebrating his 100th birthday. So happy birthday, sir. In today's episode, we are going to follow an incredible journey, the journey of water. We are going to explore what happens when rain falls on land, how it travels, what it picks up along the way, and how eventually some of it ends up right here, where we are, on the coral reef. Along the way, we are going to discover three super important ecosystems: the mangroves, the seagrass meadows, and of course, the coral reefs. We are going to discover them independently, but most importantly, we are going to understand how they are all connected. So before we start, let's have a look at who's joining us today, who are the junior scientists joining us for this episode. So we have Charlotte Hoos from Lagrange in Georgia. We have Danny from Grand Cayman. We have also the class of Miss Glover from Bayless Court in Bristol. Shout out to Mabel and Bob from England, to Greg also from the US, to Dario in Grand Cayman. Well, I can't mention everyone, but there's many more joining us today, either from the classroom or from their home. And I know that some of you are also joining us from Compass TV, so welcome everyone. It is fantastic to have you all here. Let me introduce you the team that is working very hard to bring this episode to you today. First, behind the scene, we have the production team. Hi, the production team.
Hello.
So as you can see, the production team and I are on the boat at the moment above the water. We are on the north coast of Little Cayman inside the marine reserve at Jackson's Reef. It is one of my favorite places around Little Cayman, so I am very excited to get down there in the water where the rest of the team is waiting for us. I believe that our underwater host today, Amy, is ready to guide us on our Reach to Reef journey. Amy, how is it looking like down there?
Yeah, Elsa, it is absolutely amazing down here. As you guys can see, the visibility is amazing, and I am completely surrounded by life. I've actually got a big shoal of snappers just above me there. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I am surrounded by so much life. Now every fish and every coral you see around me is connected by what happens on land. See, this water hasn't just appeared here. Like Elsa said, it has travelled through lots of different ecosystems and picked up lots of different things along the way. And that is why today's episode looks a little bit different to most of ours. We're actually going to be starting today from land. So Elsa, can you get us started and explain what our first ecosystem is?
Yes, so Amy, this right here represents rainwater as it falls on land during a storm. What happens to rainwater when it falls on land? Well, some of it soaks into the ground, some of it evaporates, and the rest will flow across land, eventually joining rivers and ending up in the ocean. But as it travels, it picks up things. What kind of things do you think water picks up as it flows across land? Let us know in the chat and I will have a look in just a minute. Before that, let's do a little experiment. This represents land. So as water flows across land, it picks up soil, it picks up nutrients, it even picks up pollution. Look, I have some pieces of plastic right here. So let's see if you mentioned anything else in the chat. Some of you mentioned dirt, chemicals, rubbish, fertilizer. Yes, all of that can also travel with water. So by the time this rainwater reaches the sea, it's not just water anymore. It is everything it has picked up along the way. Now, if this murky water reached directly onto the reef, it would be a disaster. It would smother the corals, completely blocking out the sunlight that they need to survive. But that's not what happens. Because on the way out to the coral reef, this water will pass through a very interesting ecosystem, the mangroves. Amy, can you tell us more about the mangroves?
Yeah, of course, Elsa. But as you guys can see, I am currently on our coral reefs, not our mangroves. So I headed out yesterday to show you our first ecosystem nice and up close. But just before we head over there, what animals do you guys at home think that I might see in our mangroves? Let us know in the chat and we'll see if I see any on my visit. Now, let's head over to the south side of the island.
Okay, so I'm out here in some of our mangroves here in Little Cayman. And as you can see, these are trees that grow right where the land meet the sea. But what makes this species so special is their roots, as you can see up here. See, unlike most other species whose roots grow deep underground, mangrove roots grow up just above the water, meaning that they can grow in extremely salty conditions that most other species wouldn't be able to survive. And if we take a closer look, you'll see that these roots are extremely entangled. They almost look like a giant net, and that is exactly what they do. So when water moves through them, it slows down, sediment gets trapped, and nutrients gets filtered. And that is a great way of remembering what mangroves do. They are essentially a giant water filter. So they stop all of that muck from the land going out and onto our coral reefs. But that's not the only impressive thing that these mangroves do. They're also a giant nursery for lots of our young marine life. See, as we can see from these roots, these also stretch just beneath the water, meaning that it creates a natural maze for lots of our juvenile fish. So our larger predators can't come in and eat them. So here in Little Cayman, we have lots of different species that use this as their nursery. And one of my personal favourites is when we get to see the juvenile sharks. We often see lots of small lemon sharks and nurse sharks coming around these waters. But unfortunately, like so many of our other ecosystems, mangroves are under threat. See, people like to chop these down to build things such as hotels, roads, and lots of other infrastructure. But when we lose our mangroves, that sediment stops getting caught, the water moves out much quicker to the ocean, and even all of our juvenile fish lose their home. But I'll let Elsa demonstrate this to you a little bit more live on the boat.
Thanks, Amy. That was fascinating. So now let's see that in action. Remember my jar of murky water? Well, this is the mangroves. This represents the mangroves. And if I pour it through, look how much clearer the water becomes. So that is what mangroves do every day. They act as a filter. Without mangroves, all this murky, full of soil water would go straight out onto the coral reefs. But that's not the only thing that mangroves do. They are also a home to many animals. In the chat, some of you from Village Montessori mentioned sharks, yes, fish, crabs. Dolphins, I'm not sure we find dolphins in the mangroves. It's usually a bit too shallow for dolphins. But jellyfish, yes. Doug mentioned juvenile fish. Yes, we can have baby barracudas, for example. We find them a lot in the mangroves around Little Cayman. So mangroves act as a filter and also an important habitat for the marine life. So that was our first stop in our reef to reef journey. Amy, what's next?
Yep, so after passing through our mangroves, the next stop on our waters journey is the seagrass meadows. Now, obviously, I'm still not quite on our seagrass meadows, so yesterday I also headed out there to show you these up close. Now when you first see this plant, you might think it looks a bit like seaweed, which it does. But this is actually an angiosperm, which means it has roots, stems and leaves, just like our other plants on land. I will explain that a little bit more for you in our following video.
Okay, so I've now moved out from our mangroves and now I am here at some of our seagrass beds here in Little Cayman. And just underwater all around me, something really important is happening. Now these plants might not look like much at first, but they're made up of roots that we call rhizomes, along with stems and leaves, just like all of our other plants on land. And those roots do something truly amazing. They grow deep into the seabed, holding the sand tightly in place so it doesn't get washed away and prevents any sort of erosion. And while the roots are working on keeping our ocean floor nice and stable, at the same time, the leaves help to slow down any water movement, very similar to how our mangroves work. And this lets tiny particles settle and build up over time, stopping even more muck from reaching our coral reefs. But one of the most powerful things our seagrass does isn't something we can easily see. It actually helps to fight climate change. See, seagrass absorbs carbon dioxide from the water, and through photosynthesis it turns it into plant material. So instead of releasing that carbon back into the atmosphere, it stores it in its roots and the mud beneath. And that carbon can stay locked away for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And this is what we call blue carbon, which is essentially just a scientist's way of saying carbon stored in the ocean. And that really matters because too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is one of our main causes of climate change. So by trapping it, seagrass helps to slow down global warming, protects our climate, and also helps to keep our oceans nice and healthy. And it isn't just us humans who love the seagrass beds. Of course, these underwater meadows are completely full of life, especially here in Little Cayman. And if we're really lucky, we might spot a turtle cruising around. They use their really strong beaks to munch on the seagrass and keep our grass nice and trimmed. And while our turtles do love to steal the show, don't forget that we do have lots of other tiny fish and lots of other marine life quietly moving around in the background. And this makes the whole seagrass bed feel like a busy living neighbourhood. But unfortunately, our seagrass is very fragile. It could be easily damaged by things such as boat anchors, propellers, and lots of other coastal construction. So when it gets torn up, the stored carbon is unfortunately released back into the environment, and the seabed becomes unstable, along with the animals depending on it losing their homes. But fortunately, here at CCMI, we've been studying our seagrass beds to better understand and protect them. But I'll let Elsa delve into this a bit more for you on the boat, and I'll catch you guys back underwater.
Thanks, Amy. So for the past few years here at CCMI, thanks to the support of Butterfield, we have been studying seagrass. How does it work? Well, our scientists go out into the ocean and they will collect real data from the seabed. They measure how fast seagrass is growing, how deep the roots go, or how much carbon is stored in the muck underneath. They also run experiments to observe how seagrass is reacting to changes in the environment, warmer temperatures, for example. And that's how we discover something really exciting. The seagrass here in Little Cayman stores more carbon than the average seagrass in the Caribbean. And more than that, it is thermotolerant. That means that it can survive in warmer waters up to 35 degrees Celsius and keep storing carbon. As the ocean around the world is getting warmer and warmer, that makes the seagrass here a bit of a climate superhero. And now let's go back to my jar of water. So remember, this water has been filtered by mangroves already. After the mangroves, it will pass through the seagrass meadows. This on the top is the seagrass leaves, and you have the roots and the muck underneath. So let's see what happens. See, the water is even clearer. So not only the seagrass is a carbon sink, but it's also a second filter as the water is going out into the ocean. So that was our second stop in our reach to reef journey. We are now going to head to the third stop, which is the coral reef. And before we join Amy right down around the coral reefs, I have one question for you. What animals do you think we will find today around the coral reefs? Let us know in the chat, and if we will see if that's what we find underwater. Amy, what do you have around you?
Yeah, Elsa, like I said, I have got absolutely loads around me at the moment. So if we just take a look behind, you can see all of these beautiful sea fans. I've also got some squirrel fish, some damselfish, and I've also got my absolute favourites, the fairy bassalettes, just to the right hand side of me. But of course, that is just the start of it. But I wonder if anyone actually put corals in the chat. Because like we learned on the last episode, corals actually are animals. See, they are made up of lots of tiny animals that we call polyps. And it's these polyps that build the entire physical foundation of our reefs. So, in fact, corals actually get 95% of their energy from sunlight. And that's why it's so important that we try and keep the waters down here as clear as possible, like they are today. And of course, that is why our mangroves and seagrass play such an important role. But as I'm sure a lot of you at home have guessed, the mangroves and seagrass can't clear up all of that sediment. So Elsa, can you explain to us a little bit more of what the reefs do with that remaining sediment?
Yes, and for that we are going to go back to my jar of water one last time. So this has been filtered by the mangroves and by the seagrass meadows. But as you can see, it is not 100% clear. It still carries sediments, and these sediments has nutrients in them. So on land, nutrients will help your grass and other plants grow. Well, in the water, it does a bit the same, except it will help another kind of organism to grow, and that is the algae. So in the water, corals and algae compete for space. In normal conditions, when seagrass and mangroves do their filtering job properly, there is just enough nutrients on the reef so that algae can grow without threatening too much the corals. But what would happen if there was too much nutrients on the reef? What do you think? Who would outcompete the other? The algae or the corals? If you are thinking it's the team algae that will win, well, you are right. And that would be a problem, because what happens when the algae is overgrowing and taking over on the reef is that it blocks sunlight, it smothers corals, and in the end, the reef stops growing. Amy, do you have any algae around you?
Yep. Unfortunately, Elsa, as you guys can see, we do have quite a bit of algae down here. So if we take a bit of a closer look, do you see all that green fuzzy stuff on top? That is the algae. Now, unfortunately, over the last 10 years here in the Cayman Islands, our algae coverage has been going up and our coral coverage has been going down. And this is a very common trend all across the world. And it is due to so many different reasons. For example, pollution. We also have rising ocean temperatures, and this obviously causes our corals to bleach. Overfishing is also another major factor. So do you guys remember those herbivores that we spoke about in our last episode? Well, if we remove too many of these guys that eat the algae, then it leaves the algae to thrive and continue growing. And unfortunately for our corals, they are extremely fragile. So it means they are very susceptible to a lot of human activity. So it means when we anchor our boats and when we go over our reefs with our boats, We have to be extremely careful so we don't damage them. And Elsa, can you explain to us why that is so much of a problem?
Well, that's a problem, Amy, because we don't want to lose our coral reefs. Coral reefs are an incredibly important ecosystem. I could mention the fact that they provide a home and food for more than 25% of the marine life in the ocean. You guys mentioned in the chat turtles, parrotfish, groupers, sharks, rays, snappers. All of these animals live and are around the reef during their life, so they need the reefs. I could also mention the fact that the reefs provide fish for us, humans, so food. But there's something else. You see, the coral reefs sit in between the deep ocean and the land. They act as a natural barrier, stopping the waves, breaking the waves, and slowing down their energy before they reach the shore. That means that when storms hit, they hit with less force, protecting the shoreline and all the ecosystems growing on the shoreline, like our seagrass meadows and like our mangroves. So, seagrass and mangroves are doing a very good job at filtering the water for our coral reefs, but the corals pay it back by protecting the areas where the seagrass and the mangroves grow. If corals were damaged or were about to disappear, I'm said that there is a turtle underwater. Let's head down right now. Amy, that's amazing.
Yeah, guys, sorry, I've been trying to get your attention for a little while because the turtle actually just swam right over us and bumped into our camera. He is now just carrying on his way, but yeah, he did come in super close.
We can see it very well.
So hopefully he hangs around for a little bit longer. Sorry, Elsa, I don't know if I interrupted you there. Did you have any more to say?
Yes, but that was very cool. I believe that was a hawksbill turtle, and from what I can see, it is hanging out with you guys. So we might just see it again when we come down. All right, so I was saying that that the corals are protecting the land. So they're actually protecting the shore and the coastline and everything that sits on it. So if coral reefs were to disappear, it would weaken the coastline and making us humans on land were more exposed and at risk from flooding and from strong storms. One last reason why we don't want coral reefs to disappear is that they are incredibly beautiful, and the turtle that we can see right now is also incredibly beautiful. Amazing. So Amy, that's a very nice hawksbill turtle that you got here.
Yeah, he has been hanging around for quite a while now. I think we're super lucky to still have him here, but I think he is about to head on his way. Now guys, obviously around me, as I'm sure you guys can see in the distance, I think that our camera is just a little bit tangled up in the wires at the moment. Sorry about this, guys. There we go, I think we should be able to pull it back now. But yeah, as I was saying, all of this around me, I am completely surrounded by life. Now, it's not just our big species, we even have lots of small creatures that call this place home. So they move in and out of the cracks, and then they use this area to feed, and also rear a lot of their young. But like we just saw, the reefs are also home to a lot of our larger visitors. So here in the Cayman Islands, we have 3 species of turtle. This is our hawksbill turtles, which we just saw, our green turtles, and our loggerhead turtles. And what I'm on now are our seabeds here, our sandbeds, is where we see our species of ray. And my personal favourite species is the eagle ray. Now these are super easy to identify because they have dark backs and lots of white spots all over them. And I absolutely love when we get to see them. Elsa, do you guys have your own favourite species?
Well, that's a very tough question, Amy. I think one of the fish that I love seeing on the reef is the parrotfish. They're super colorful and I love the way they're moving around with their little pectoral fins. But part of the animals that I also love seeing underwater are the ones that we don't see often. For example, a few days ago I was snorkeling around Little Cayman and I saw yellowfin tuna. Yellowfin tuna don't really hang out on the reef usually, so it was quite a surprise, and encounters like this make you feel completely blessed. And that's a good question actually. So we've explored the mangroves, we've explored the seagrass, now the coral reefs, but what would happen if I followed my yellowfin tuna and if I kept going? Amy, can you let us know?
Yeah, of course. So if I was to swim in that direction and I just kept going, I would reach the open ocean. And here in the Cayman Islands, we have a very steep drop-off. It goes into the deep, vast blue, and it even reaches depths of about 7,500 meters, if not more. And here there is no coral, there is no roots, and there is no places to hide. So it means that any species that do live here have to be extremely well adapted. So let's take your yellowfin tuna for example, Elsa. These guys are completely built for speed. They want to hunt their prey over long distances until they finally catch up with them and take them out of the water. Next up, we have lots of animals that like to travel in groups. For example, we have dolphins, and these travel in groups that we call pods. And by travelling in a group, it makes them a lot more safer, and they have lots more eyes looking around for food, and a nice tasty shoal of fish. But then some of our other species, like certain whales, don't stay still at all. See, they actually travel hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres in the look for food and warmer waters. Isn't that cool, Elsa?
Yeah, and what's interesting is that we can see some of them also around the reef. There's my yellowfin tuna, but also dolphins. Around the reef of Little Cayman last year, we also saw a whale shark. So why do they come here around the reef? Well, some come to feed, some come to rest, some come to reproduce. But what's important is an animal that you can see here on the reef might have traveled an incredible journey out in the open ocean to get here. That means that the coral reefs are not just important on their own. They are part of a much bigger ocean system that stretches far beyond what we can see. So, in our journey from ridge to reef, we have seen that everything is connected, and even beyond the reef, actually. So, let's dig in now into why it is so important for the ecosystems, but also for our marine life, because during their life, they will travel across these different ecosystems. Let's have a look at that.
A fish's life begins as a fertilized egg. These eggs float near the surface, drifting with ocean currents, which help spread young fish between reefs. After a short time, they hatch into larvae. Larvae are tiny and weak swimmers, so they drift as part of plankton. And as they grow, they begin to develop fins and become more fish-like. With stronger bodies, they can start swimming and move away from the open ocean where there's little shelter from predators. They begin to follow cues like smell, sound, and structure towards the coast. Many settle in mangrove forests. The tangled roots create hiding spaces and protect them from larger predators. Murky water makes it harder for predators to hunt, and there's plenty of food to help them grow. As they get bigger, they move out into nearby seagrass beds. Here, they find new food like algae and small animals, and more space to move and develop their swimming skills. Eventually, as stronger, less vulnerable fish, they move to the coral reef. Here, they become part of a diverse ecosystem, feeding, interacting, and playing important roles on the reef.
So fish travel an incredible journey during their life. Now you understand. So now we are entering the last part of our episode, and we're going to talk about protecting these ecosystems. And I have a tricky question for you to start with. If you had to choose only one ecosystem to help us fight climate change, which one would you choose? Would you choose the mangroves, the coral reefs, or the seagrass? Let us know and we will have a look at your answers in a minute. For now, I'm going to ask you, Amy, which one would you choose?
Well, I'm sure as a lot of you guys probably guessed, of course I would love to say our coral reefs. Because I don't think any of us can deny just how beautiful it is here. Even just behind the camera I've got a barracuda just looking over, but I don't think you guys will be able to see it unfortunately. Just a little bit too far away, but I could stay here all day. But unfortunately, I think that your question is actually a bit of a trick question, Elsa. Because here at CCMI, we have actually learnt that our ecosystems can actually thrive on their own. They all depend on each other. So let's take our coral reefs for example. They help to break up wave activity so that the seagrass beds behind them can grow nice and strong. And here they can store that carbon and stop all of that extra sediment being washed back up into the water column. And then just back from that again, we've got our mangroves, and that acts as our buffer from the land and the sea, stopping as much of that sediment as possible. And obviously because when one part gets stronger, the others do too. Do you want to continue this, Elsa?
Yes, so I saw in the chat that some of you would save the mangroves, some of you would save the coral reefs, but as you were explaining, Amy, it's not about picking one, it's about protecting the whole system. And that is what our scientists have been studying here at CCMI. See, we don't just study one place. We have been collecting data over coral reefs, seagrass and mangroves over many years. We went back to the same site again and again and again. And this long-term data set allows us to see the changes and see how these ecosystems interact. That's how, for example, we understood that seagrass and coral reef can store more seagrass when they are close to each other, which is amazing. So now we are working on a tool to help protect these ecosystems. This is called a carbon credit certification tool. It is a bit of a fancy word, but basically it is going to help us to show the world how a healthy mangrove and how a healthy seagrass is worth in the fight against climate change. Just so that more and more people are inclined and willing to help protect them. So that is something we do here at CCMI, but you can also do something from home. Amy, do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, okay, so obviously you guys are currently looking at a big barracuda that's now come in to see us. This is the one that I mentioned just a moment ago, sat behind the camera. And he has now become a bit less camera shy and has come out to see everyone. Now he's completely harmless, he is just coming in to check out what we're up to, because we've got a nice lot of shiny equipment. And he just wants to see what we're doing. But he is completely good down here. But anyway, Elsa, of course there is loads that we can all be doing to help protect our reefs. I'll just let the camera come spin back around, because we have got quite a few wires going on down here. But yeah, there is absolutely loads that we can all be doing at home to help our reefs and everything that lives in it. And this can be anything from choosing sustainable seafood, to reducing your carbon footprint, or even just making sure that when you guys go in the ocean, you leave everything exactly as you found it. Now, somewhere on your screens, it could be right in front of me, you should see a checklist. Now, how many of these things do you do at home? Do you turn your lights off when you're not in the room? Do you try and use less plastic? There is absolutely loads we can all be doing. And if you think there's something you are doing that we haven't mentioned, let us know in the chat and we can take a look at them in a little moment. But anyway, what do you guys are looking at that, I have been told that we've had quite a few questions come through during our episode. So Elsa, is it okay if I hand back over to you? So we can...
Yes, and I'm going to have a look right now at the questions that we have in the chat. So we have a first question. How do we know how much carbon is stored in the seagrass? Well, what our scientists would do is they would go out in seagrass meadows and they would collect small samples of sediment. The sediment is like the muck underneath the seagrass. They will bring this back to the lab, and then inside the lab they would analyze how much carbon is stored in the muck and in the sediment underneath. That is how we discovered that the seagrass here in Little Cayman actually stores more carbon than the average seagrass in the Caribbean. We also have a question from Doug. In many parts of the Caribbean, we see less seagrass than in Cayman. Why? Well, that's a good question. So I'm not a specialist on every places in the Caribbean, but what is threatening mangroves at the moment? Seagrass, sorry, not mangroves. Seagrass than in Cayman. Why? Well, seagrass has different threats they're facing. One of them is climate change. Climate change is impacting everything that lives in the water, so that could be one of the reasons. Coastal development will also impact the seagrass meadows, because if you develop on the shore and build a lot of things like docks and things like that, well, you would destroy the seagrass areas. Another reason is when we have anchors or a lot of movement in the water, when people step on them or throw anchors on them, that could be also another reason why we have less seagrass. But to be honest, to answer very precisely your question, we would have to know exactly where you are talking about, because it depends on each places. The seagrass also needs a very shallow water. So if you don't have this kind of environment, seagrass won't grow. Let's see if we have another question. Why is it good to store carbon? How does this help combat climate change? Well, see, one of the drivers of climate change is that we are releasing carbon in the atmosphere, and too much. That is what is leading climate change, too much carbon in the atmosphere. So we need ecosystems that will store it. You have trees on land and the ocean is part of it. And our mangroves, our seagrass will store this carbon. So if we destroy them, well, the carbon that they were holding inside them is going to be released. And then we have even more carbon in the atmosphere, and that leads an even faster climate change. So that is why it is very important to have ecosystems that store carbon, and it is why we need to keep them and try to make them even thrive more, because they will help us a lot in the next few years. Is seeing turtles and barracudas a sign that the reef is healthy? Yes, it is. So let's take the barracudas, for example. The barracudas are quite high on the food chain. They will eat smaller fish, and then these smaller fish will eat even smaller fish, and then plankton. So if we have a lot of barracudas, it means that they have enough food. So it means that the food chain below them is quite healthy. So when we have, for example, big predators like this, we're talking about sharks also. Sharks are at the very top of the food chain. So when you have a lot of sharks on the reef, that is usually a very good sign. It means that the reef is very healthy. What are both of your favorite marine animals? Both for me and Amy. So Amy, I'm gonna give it over to you now, and I will give my favorite animal after. So Amy, what's your favorite animal?
My favourite marine animal? That's a very tricky question because obviously we have so many. But other than the eagle riz, I would say my smallest favourite animal is our fairy basslet. So they are bright yellow and purple, which I think is just super amazing. What about you, Arthur?
Well, one of my favorite animals that I really enjoy seeing are the devil rays. You might have heard of the manta rays. Well, the devil rays are cousins of the manta rays. They are a bit smaller. Unfortunately, we don't really see any of them around the Caribbean, so I have very little chance of seeing them around the reefs in Little Cayman, but still I'm crossing my fingers to see them again one day. Do we have any other question? And I look at the time. Are there mangroves all over the world? So no, mangroves are not found all over the world. They are mostly in tropical and subtropical waters. So where we have warm waters, basically. And it's funny because we find mangroves most of the time where we find also coral reefs. So they have kind of the same area of repartition around the world. If we just do one thing as individuals in Cayman to help the reef, what should we do? That is a very good question. Let me think, but that would be maybe my recommendation, but maybe someone else will have another opinion on the question. I think the main thing you can do today is fighting climate change. So try to reduce as much as possible your carbon footprint. That is very important right now, and we all have to do something against it. And maybe something more local is try to preserve the coral reefs when you go in the water. Don't put sunscreen that contains chemicals. Don't touch anything. Just leave it exactly pristine as you found it when you arrived, basically. Amy, do you have another opinion on that? What do you think is the main thing that we should do as individuals to protect the reef in Little Cayman, or in the Cayman Islands, in general?
In the Cayman Islands in general, I'd say probably the most important thing for you guys is just leaving everything as you found it. Because our ecosystems here are very delicate. But all across the world, everyone can be playing their part to help, as I mentioned earlier. So I don't think we can nail it down to one thing, but we can definitely all play our part.
Yeah, and there's one more thing I can maybe add around that question, is that a few weeks ago the government of the Cayman Islands just protected 6 more areas around the country, and including important mangroves areas like Duck Pond, Little Cay, Western Mangrove Cays Marine Park in Grand Cayman, and we also have Tarpon Lake now protected in Little Cayman. So protecting areas like this, implementing marine parks. In Little Cayman, more than 70% of the waters are protected around the island. This is definitely a big deal in protecting the ecosystems and making them maybe recover from stress. I have the production team telling me that we should move on because we are out of time for today. So before we finish, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Butterfield for supporting our blue carbon research. And obviously a huge thank you to all of you for joining us today live from Little Cayman. So some of you are in the classroom, I think some of you are also home. If you were joining us from Compass TV also, we were super happy to be live on TV today. It was an absolute pleasure for me to take you through this Reach to a Reef journey. And I think, so we are having currently a problem with the camera underwater. So I was supposed to give it to Amy for her to finish the episode, but I will do it for her, unfortunately. So what we wanted to tell you is that, well, remember this: mangroves protect and filter. Seagrass stores carbon and supports life. And coral reefs defend our coast. So guys, keep protecting them, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep asking questions. Hopefully we will see you all for our final broadcast of 2026, and it's airing on the 5th of June. So you can even watch us if you're in Grand Cayman in Camana Bay Cinema. So Maybe for next episode you will watch us on a big screen. We'll be delving even deeper in the mysteries of the Cayman Island reefs. From Amy and from myself, thank you again for joining us today. Bye guys, and see you in June!